Welcome to TechTrends. TechTrends is a podcast series that provides perspective on the latest trends in technology, fintech, and digital. On today's special episode, my colleague Alton McDowell speaks with one of JPMorgan Chase's clients about how they're using technology to build their business. Enjoy.
I'm Alton McDowell, co-head of the Commercial Bank's Technology and Disruptive Commerce Group here at JPMorgan Chase. And today, I'm speaking with Matthias Kurwig, co-founder and CEO of Enervee, a company that empowers today's consumers to make energy-smart buying decisions. Matthias, welcome to TechTrends.
Thank you, Alton. Great to be here.
So Matthias, can you tell us exactly what Enervee does and how it got started?
Well, we started Enervee about a decade ago, 11 years. The idea really was to start a technology company that would combine behavioral science, data science, and apply digital marketing to reach shoppers at scale and nudge them to make more energy aware decisions. So really the idea of people are buying a lot of things all the time that consume natural resources, energy, gas, water, and how can we help them make a better, more efficient choice when they're in the market to purchase these products?
I love that nudging. There's a couple of books around the power of nudging, so I can appreciate that. So you're a technology company to make energy efficiency actionable. And I know from a consumer perspective, many times I kind of thought about, okay, how can I do good things for the environment, but not really having ways to really put it in some context and really do things about it. So from Enervee's standpoint, how important, when you think about kind of this broad ecosystem, is energy efficiency in that conversation?
Great question. And to your point, I think the awareness and perception around that also has changed a lot since we started the company. The core sort of opportunity really hasn't changed, though. When you look at typical electricity use in a home in the US, about 75% of that use comes from what the industry calls plug load products, so devices you plug into the outlets in the home. So 3/4 of your utility bill, your electric utility bill, comes from those products. If you optimize these devices to be as efficient as they can be, then you can reduce the consumption per home dramatically, like cut it in half. If you have older appliances and you updated them to the most efficient current models, the impact is dramatic. And the thing that's sort of interesting to think about is when you install a really efficient product in your home, it's sort of a one-time decision, right? The minute you are in the market, your refrigerator breaks, you say, oh, I want one, this is that large, I like the silver color, you maybe have certain features you care about. Beyond that, most consumers are pretty indifferent on what the appliance actually is. So if you then move them to a really highly efficient model and they install it in their home, that refrigerator is going to run day and night for 10 years plus. So with one intervention, one decision, you'll reap 10 to 12 years of energy savings, which on aggregate is really, really significant. So when you think about how can the US or really any country get to a net zero future, maximizing efficiency in the home and specifically electric efficiency, because that connects to using renewable energy, which is electric. And so you want to be able to make use of it in your home, is the single largest driver on the residential side in terms of getting to a net zero scenario.
It's interesting you say that. I was reading something in the paper today, and I think it was a couple of companies who come out who are this focus on how do we get to net zero and this whole energy efficiency. Now, from Enervee's perspective, now to achieve this mission, this net zero, you had to come up with a scoring system, right? Because there was some way, especially as a consumer, how do I know if what I'm buying is good, is it bad? Tell us a little bit about the technology and the innovation behind how you kind of created a scoring system.
Yeah, so anecdotally, actually somewhat amusing. When we started the company, and me, being left-brained and German on top of that, I really thought that by just presenting to consumers the financial cost of operating a product over time and allow them to compare that number when people are shopping in the market, I thought, well, it's obvious what's going to happen. Everybody's going to pick the product with the lowest operating cost. Right. What actually happened when we tested that was very different. By showing this extra number of sort of operating lifetime costs to appliances, All people did was leave our website and go to a retailer that wouldn't tell them about this number, because the subjective perception was, oh my God, now I have a purchase price of $800 and I have energy cost of another $800. And the sort of the perception was that the product on our website is more expensive than to buy it in other places. So shocking people with energy costs and the notion of comparing sort of the difference in operating it was not the way to go. And we worked with on our advisory board, and we had a PhD in behavioral science, and we tried to figure out how can we get consumers who are typically not actively shopping with the thought in mind, I want to maximize energy efficiency. They just want a new refrigerator for the right budget that is well reviewed and all these things. How can we get them to make efficiency part of the consideration? And that's where this whole nudging idea came in. And that's where we ended up with a score. Because if you do our Enervee score, which is a 0 to 100 efficiency rating, that updates daily based on all the products that we see in the market. So to give you a little bit of idea of sort of the quantity of that, on a good day, there are between 2,000 and 3,000 refrigerator models available in the US in retail. So when you are in the market and you make the choice, you really are looking for some help to narrow this down, which our platform provides. And then the score then basically is the final element that makes you go like, oh, I got the refrigerator in the size I want, the color I like, the budget I can afford. And now, yes, sure, I'm going to get the one with the high green number because that's good. So people don't think about it necessarily in cost reduction or environmental benefits. At least they haven't 10 years ago. I think that has changed a little bit in the last few years. But essentially, it is more like a gamification mechanism, where somebody goes like, sure, I'm going to get the product with the high green number because that's good, and I can brag to my neighbor about it and personally feel good about it. And I think that is where this intervention works. And this has been, studied and peer-reviewed and published because we work with utilities that need to validate this effect of the savings. And when our score is active, shoppers typically end up buying products that are about 20% more energy efficient than the average market. So the increased transparency of that scoring system and the underlying data set has a measurable effect on what people end up choosing.
Now, which is so interesting, because back to the nudge, I know as a consumer, as you're saying, once I get through kind of the aesthetics, I want X, Y, and Z, that last piece that really does become really important to me, I know, is that energy efficiency. Mm-hmm. And so the scoring mechanism really does help, again, a consumer like me put some context around, all right, I got the aesthetics out the way. How do I then focus on this other important aspect, like not only the economy, but what's happening in kind of green energy and mm-hmm. energy efficiency makes it so much easier. So I appreciate it from that perspective. Speaking of the utilities, you guys have about 21 different utility companies you work with 38 million, I think, households, which is absolutely amazing when I think about it. And also, I think you also said on the website, because you guys do eco-financing for a lot of these appliances that actually, kind of fit the model you guys are focused on. Tell me a little bit about how you forge these partnerships with these utility companies. I mean, 38 million households is definitely a lot, but how do you kind of put these partnerships, how do you put them in place, and how are you set to scale? Because there are a lot of households out there, and I kind of feel like this is probably just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we just crossed 40 million, actually. We launched with our first utility in Canada, so we are expanding. But to your point, right, it's about, 1 in 3 US households are covered with 40 million. And when we thought about accomplishing sort of the company mission, which was really to reach as many purchase decisions of appliances and electronics as we possibly can, there were really sort of 3 main barriers that we needed to address. The first one was the actual, how can we get a shopper while they shop to pick a better product? This is what our choice engine technology with the score does really, really well. We make the market transparent. We empower the consumer to compare. The score gives you, as we just talked about, this element of saying, okay, I want to go green and I pick a better product. The second piece then is, how do you get this information in front of, you know, the hundreds of millions of purchase decisions that are made each year in the US in these categories? Between the large appliances and electronics, it's about 300 million individual purchases. So how do you get there? And so we looked, and yes, you could, you know, think of it as a standalone sort of shopping comparison platform. That's a really tough product or platform to launch, because you go to your major retailer that you are familiar with. And that's where utilities became really important partners to us. Most utilities in the US are mandated on a state level to increase energy efficiency in their customer base. So there's a utility commission in each state and says, you know, of all the kilowatt hours that you need to service your households, year over year, you need to reduce the average consumption in these households. And the US on aggregate spends about $8 billion a year in energy efficiency programs through utilities to accomplish that goal. And that was really sort of our go-to-market strategy. So let's partner with utilities, take our platform in a white labeled solution. So the utility essentially offers a marketplace to their customers, operated and managed by us with our platform and our score. The utility gets the increase in energy efficiency that they are mandated to reach. And we get what we want, which is basically get our scoring system and this buying experience in front of consumers. So that sort of, we empowered the consumers. We now can engage them at large scale with the utilities. And then the third barrier that you need to address when you want to get to greater efficiency in retail is affordability. So how do you make sure that people who really do need a new refrigerator are not forced to buy some used discounted product at a mom and pop store locally, but instead of having access to a super modern, highly efficient electric device to lower their utility bill for the next 10 years and also reduce carbon emissions on this. And that's where financing is really essential. There's a large percentage of US households that don't have the income available that when a major appliance breaks and you need $1,000 or more to replace it, you can just sort of go out and purchase it. So a form of credit is needed. And I think even before COVID, about 40% of appliance purchases in the US were financed, but typically over more traditional sort of retail finance offers, you know, put it on a store credit card or things like that, which often are attractive in the short term. They might have a interest-free or low interest rate period for 6 months or so. But if you then don't pay it off, you are typically hit with a pretty significant APR of 30% or so. So we looked at this and saying, how can we structure a loan product that aligns more with the actual lifetime use of the appliance? So something that does no money down, long loan duration, sort of lower APRs. And we obviously needed some help with that. And the state of California was actually very interested in seeing if they, from the Treasury's perspective, could support something like this. And they changed their regulations, and we launched a program with them in October last year, where the state covers 90% of the loss risks on those loan portfolios for the benefit of getting these highly efficient products into consumers' homes, which results into us doing what we call eco-financing, as you mentioned, which is a 60-month term loan, no money down, a 9% APR currently in California. But most importantly, because of the support of the state, we do get the loan eligibility requirements down to a FICO score around 580, which means we're really reaching people that need this type of support the most. And that has been sort of really the final piece to address all these three barriers in getting people to be able to shop efficient.
I think that's such an interesting strategy, because I know if you're going to ever, I think as the planet, want to get to a better place from an energy and conservation perspective, you got to have people who don't have a large amount of disposable income. You got to have them, you got to give them access to these products and services. And if you can't do that, it's just kind of not going to happen from, kind of really moving the needle, honestly, in terms of the overall environment. Continue a little bit more about the customer here. Consumer satisfaction is important. I mean, I know anybody who has a consumer business, you got to focus on consumer satisfaction. tell me, how do you ensure a great consumer experience? And in the process, what are kind of some tips you can give people listening who really want to increase, again, their consumer base with some of the tips that you guys have identified and benefited from?
Great question. I think, before I started Enervee, I worked in advertising and marketing for pretty much all of my professional life. And I think the secret weapon in delivering an exceptional customer experience is to be very clear about what you stand for as a company and brand, and what the value is that you want to provide to your customers. And when I think about us, we are a deeply mission-driven company. We are very clear about getting more efficient products into people's homes at scale. And everything we do at Enervee, we are certified green business in California. We purchase carbon offsets for the delivery of the product. So the entire experience, start to finish, is consistent with that idea of let's reduce our carbon footprint, let's increase energy efficiency to get to greater sustainability. So to get to your question of customer satisfaction, so you obviously need to do all the best practices, have a great, well-trained customer support team. You need a CRM system that allows us to track sort of the lifetime interaction we have with our customers. If somebody had purchased something a long time ago, we should be aware. We should be able to do personalized messaging and marketing to them. That's all best practice, and pretty much anyone who works in sort of digital consumer marketing would know these things. Trying all of these things, you inevitably will make mistakes, right? Things go wrong. We do, and I think that's where sort of the brand and sort of value proposition piece comes in. The question whether a consumer, or really any customer, I think it's equally true for our B2B relationships with utilities and retailers and even the government entities that we work with. When you make a mistake and you credibly explain, we didn't do a great job here and we'll do better. The question whether the consumer believes you and gives you a second chance is very closely connected to whether they believe you as a company and a brand, if you're sincere about that value that you want to provide to them. So I think this is if you ask for a recommendation for people working in this space, I think being very, very clear about why you think somebody should buy from you or transact with you, and have that be the leading principle across the entire experience, from product and marketing and customer support. I think that makes the biggest difference.
No, I completely agree with you. And it's funny, as we were talking, especially whether it's businesses or consumers, I mean, individuals and companies tend not to think about energy efficiency until there's this crisis. All of a sudden there's a crisis, it becomes kind of top of mind. We think to ourselves, what can we do, whether it's a company or an individual, to really impact change? So I want you to one question I have for you is, how do you think about the future advancements of energy efficiency? How will that drive, especially as they're deployed, how will that drive people to think differently, whether it's the awareness of energy conservation, or maybe even their actions about whether, obviously, going to your website and buying the right appliances? How do you think about that?
In a very sort of black and white way, I could answer that sort of the education and awareness is almost the icing on the cake. What I care about is people making a better purchase decision. Whether they do this out of deep conviction that they want to reduce their carbon footprint and save the planet, or if they do this because it was the best deal they could get, and they get a really nice appliance in their home that does the job. But on the back end, it does what we care about, which is the efficiency and the carbon reduction. I really don't care too much from big, because we care about the aggregate impact, right? But having said that, I would say that over the last few years, the general consumer awareness and us hearing in the interaction with our customers, what can I do? Or I really enjoyed your platform because you made it so easy for me to pick the green thing, sort of, right, has been clearly a much stronger push going forward. What I was excited to see is just the night before COP26 in Dublin recently, the US government, the federal government, published their strategy to get to net zero in the United States. In their section where they talk about what do we need to do in the residential sector, moving US households to efficient electric appliances and doing this in an equitable way, to your point, right? How do we make sure that everybody can participate, is the single largest opportunity and driver to move that segment to a net zero scenario. So from that perspective, I think we almost, as I mentioned, we are at this now for 11 years, and it feels like a year ago, sort of this whole industry was put on steroids, and sort of the interest and momentum, both from the capital side, ESG stocks, the whole sustainability focus on the money side of things, as well as the sort of decisiveness on the federal and state government side to say, oh, if we do have infrastructure money, how do we actually help people directly? And getting really efficient appliances in people's homes is a great thing. It lowers your bill immediately. You have a nicer fridge at home, and collectively we reduce our footprint. So I believe that efficiency will continue to be a key driver in all of this. One thing that is also interesting to sort of to think about is we also talk a lot about renewable energy, solar, wind, and how essential that is to get to the scenario, which is absolutely true and critical, but it requires that the household is electric in order to benefit from this, right? If you're still burning gas in your range, it doesn't matter how much renewable electricity you have to use. So, and then the other thing is, if you lower the energy use of the home at scale, the amount of renewable energy you need to service it also reduces. There's a direct correlation between those two things. So you could almost think like maximizing electric efficiency across homes is almost like the baseline you establish. And then that sort of makes achieving net zero at scale so much easier.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, Matthias, I'm going to ask you to prognosticate here a little bit. Where do you see the energy smart landscape in, say, the next 5 to 10 years? And what role will Enervee play in the space?
Great question. I think looking at the sort of forces at work right now, I think maximizing efficiency in those purchases will become more and more the default behavior. I think it will happen from two sides. One, I think from a social norm perspective, people will more and more say, oh, sort of the way you would think that most people are very much on board with the idea of buying a car with a great miles per gallon. So that was understood, right? It's a good thing to do. I think that level of awareness will happen across efficiency and the products you will have for your home, because there are so many new decisions that consumers have to engage in the future with. Do I need solar? Do I need a battery at my home? If I have an electric vehicle, how do I charge this? And so there are so many changes around how we consume energy around the home that I believe that there is a big driver where going efficient is going to be the default behavior almost. I think that is the general trend of the market. As for us, I think our big frontier beyond scaling further what we're doing here with eco-financing and reaching not just 1 in 3 households, but every household in the US from a vision perspective, we really think that there are geographical markets in the world that would benefit dramatically from a platform like ours. When you think about typically the BRIC markets, the fast growing economies in the world, India, China, Brazil, and their biggest problem is that when households suddenly have more available income, the things that they buy are all high energy consuming devices. They buy air conditioning, refrigeration, right? All of those types of things. And in a market like this, having a platform that makes sure people buy the most efficient products they can is not only good for them, but it's in many of these countries the only way to really have the electric grid support that exponential growth in demand. And I think that's when if I had a sort of vision, the idea of us being able to deploy our platform in geographies like this and in business models that reach sort of the markets at scale, that would be a fantastic accomplishment.
Well, I tell you, Matthias, I am actually stunned by how all the great things you guys are doing. I will tell you, from a consumer perspective, from a business person perspective, and honestly, just as a human being, the fact that we're having, and you and your company is having such a big impact on the world that we live in is really inspiring, and has been such a great conversation. So thank you very much for talking to us here at TechTrends about your business and your vision.
Thank you so much, Alton. A real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
And to our listeners, if you like this episode, remember to subscribe and rate us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. See you next time.